into understanding what your emotional or your e-tanks really mean. And what we're going to look at is I want us to take a moment, and I want us to put ourselves in a place where we're going to understand what the value of this tank is. So if we're looking at this slide and we're looking at the full and the empty tank, you know, I want us to put ourselves in a different place. So right now, you're going to be a NASCAR driver, okay? And you're thinking about you've got this amazing race ahead of you, and at the end of the race, there's going to be a really, really cool prize. So to understand the value of this cool prize, I want each of you to raise your hand if you currently have a mortgage or you'd like to own your house scot-free. Anybody have a mortgage out there? Anybody have you know, something? Would you? How many of you that have a mortgage would love to have that paid off? Absolutely. So understanding that value, something of value to us, that's how important we're going to make sure that we understand that that emotional tank or your gas tank is full, because you can't win a race if your tank is on E. So what you get to do is in that emotional tank or in your tank for your gas of your NASCAR, we're going to take that trip. Only half of you are going to have a full tank of gas. Okay, so the ones of them are right. If you're on the right of me, you guys hold up your hands. You guys have a full gas tank. The ones on your left, you guys have half a tank of gas. And so how do you guys feel right now with your half a tank of gas? Do you feel like you're in a fair fight?
Not really.
Not really, right? So that's absolutely true. So what we're going to do is we're going to get racing. And we're going to understand that in this race, there's such a value at the end of the race that you're going to fight with everything that you have with this full or this half tank of gas. And I understand you're a bit of a disadvantage with your half a tank of gas, but we're gonna understand the value of the end of the race first. Okay? So we put value on it. So with that in mind, you run your race. Obviously, unfair. The half of you are not going to get to the end because you only have half a tank of gas, and it takes a full tank to get to the end, right? So let's shift that. Now that we understand the value of having a full tank of gas and really putting that into terms that we as adults and coaches can understand, let's shift that value and understand that your athletes also have to put the same amount of value on filling up their tank of gas. So if they have a full tank of gas, what does that look like for them emotionally? What is a full tank of gas? How are they going to be able to get to the end of that race and be able to punch it so that in that last 100 yards of that race, they're able to pass the next person and finish with a win, with whatever they have of value at the end of that race? What does that look like for them emotionally to have a full tank of gas?
I think they're confident, they're aggressive, they're helping each other out, they're being good listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you with the half a tank of gas, you probably didn't feel so great. So what would it feel like for your athlete if they only had half of a tank of gas?
They would be a little more discouraged, maybe not as enthusiastic, slow, lethargic. They might be picking on each other a little bit.
Yeah, and you know, if we relate that to us in the race, we might actually crash, right? We might actually crash. We may not even be able to finish the race because we've put our heads down, right? So we put our heads down in that race, and if you put your head down, most likely you're not going to finish a NASCAR race, correct?
Correct.
Right. So what we want to focus on is we want to focus on how do we get those athletes. We want them to finish the race. We want them. We have to understand the value of that race. So we want them to finish that race in a way that they're able to punch it full at the end of the race, give it everything they have, be excited for one another. So how can we make that happen? So in focusing on the tanks, the E-tanks, we want to figure out how we can do that as coaches. What fills it? What drains it? So what I'd like to do is let's talk about what drains first. So if you're with your athletes, what are the kinds of things, or what are the kind of actions that you feel would drain your athlete's tank?
I think if they're not playing well, maybe their teammates are on them, the parents are yelling down at them, coaches on their back, constantly criticizing them.
Yeah, excellent point, Kelly. That's fantastic. And there's other things that could take it from a drain tank, and we can fill their tanks up, and so that they can finish the race strong or finish the game strong or whatever it is. What kind of things would fill up an emotional tank in a way that, again, we want them to finish strong? It's not always just about the start, because a lot of times we start with a full tank, but we have to finish. And in order to compete and succeed, we have to finish every game, every match, every meet. We have to finish with the full tank. So how can we fill those tanks up? What kind of things can we do to do that?
I think just tell the players they're doing a good job out there and letting them try things, a lot of encouragement, high fives and thumbs ups and smiles and things like that.
Yeah, those are some great points. Now, when you say doing a good job, what do you mean by that?
I just mean whatever they're doing, they did it well.
Okay, and maybe we're talking about, are you talking about maximum effort?
Well, I think anything. Good job can be anything. It can be a skill, it can be effort, just whatever. I just to say good job to keep them excited.
Great. Now, what about things like offering specific praise for things that they've done well, that you can point out specifically items that they've done that are in a positive way, they can maybe feel it's constructive to them and they feel positive. How would you feel as an athlete if that was a conversation that a coach had with you?
I think I'd feel good if it was clear and I knew what I was doing well. I think it would be good.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are the types of things that we want to have. We have to understand the value of coaches. Now knowing that, for our value, we put a mortgage on it. We know the value, right? So for an athlete, every single game, practice, match, meet, has that kind of value on it. Every single day, every single meet, every single thing that we do, we want to understand the value of making sure that their tanks are full. So now that we kind of have talked about, we would probably have more discussion time if there's more people, right? So we would have we'd have a break and you guys talk about it. So what I want to do is so if Kelly and let's say you were with Ruben, so Kelly and Ruben, you guys are going to be partnered up, okay? And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at a scenario. And we're going to look at a scenario and flip the switch, and there's Jesse, right? So here's Jesse, and here's what Jesse does, is Jesse puts his head down every single time that he misses a shot. We've talked about the E-tank, right? Remind me, Kelly, what does an empty E-tank look like?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Remind me what an empty tank looks like.
Just discouraged, head down, not running around, just real, real depressed.
Good, good. Ruben, you tell me what a full tank looks like.
Full tank's ready to go, just aggressive, happy, fired up, just psyched.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's Jesse. So what is Jesse in this picture? What does he look like? Obviously, he's missed some shots. What does he look like? Is his tank empty or full?
It's pretty empty.
He's pretty empty. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to scenario what can we do and what does it feel like. So Kelly, what we're going to do is you're going to be Jesse, okay? And Ruben is going to, you've already missed a shot, you've already got your head down, but Ruben is going to drain your tank even more. He is going to give you bad body language, he is going to say something sarcastic, whatever it may be, but we're going to take a minute, and Ruben's actually going to, you just missed a shot, you're going to act that out individually, you're going to miss the shot, Ruben's going to turn to you, and he's going to tell you something that's pretty negative. And Kelly, what I want you to do is I want you to say the very first word that comes to your mind after he says that thing to you. Okay? And you're going to give you a minute. Ready? Go.
Right.
Yeah.
My head's down.
Yep.
Ruben yelling at me. First word in my mind is I suck.
Yeah, completely understandable. Okay, we're going to flip the switch. Now, Kelly, you're going to be the one yelling at Ruben, and we're going to give that an opportunity. Yeah, now you're already a little upset because he just drained your tank, right? So here's where we can, here's a little bit of opportunity for payback if that's what you're thinking, right? Okay, so Kelly, we're going to flip it, and Ruben just missed a shot, and you're gonna drill him, and Ruben, you're going to say the first thing that comes to your mind.
I'm going to drain his tank still?
Oh, yes, because Ruben is now Jesse, and Ruben missed a shot.
Okay. That was horrible, Ruben. What were you thinking? That was the worst shot ever. Have you not been paying attention? My grandmother could have shot better than that.
And Ruben, what's your first thought that comes to your head?
Oh, that I let the team down.
Right. So now we've talked about we both got our tanks completely drained. Kelly, tell me how that feels to have your tank. You already got your head down. Tell me how that feels to be completely drained that way.
It's just, I just don't have any energy left. I feel like I'm going to hit a wall, and I'm not even motivated.
Okay, so how do you think you're going to finish that game?
Probably pretty soon, because the coach will probably take me out because I don't have my head in the game.
Okay, and what if it's you're a track and field athlete? You don't get to come out. You've got an event coming up.
Yeah, it'll be hard to get myself focused.
Right, and I know that we're talking about scenario with Jesse, but just to put yourself in a different frame of mind of maybe an athlete that doesn't get to get subbed out. Okay, so
Okay, you can go ahead. You can finish up your sentence.
okay, so I just wanted to let's really and then like just really quickly I would fill let's fill the tanks, and so we would do the opposite and just take a minute for each to fill the tank and then see how that feels. And then once we fill the tank, I'll kind of speed through it a little bit right now, but then I would take that minute for each of you to fill each other's tanks. And how does that feel at the end of that? Being Jesse, and Jesse now has his head up and he's ready to compete and he's ready to finish strong because he knows he has the support of his coach and his teammates. So what we've learned is that in the ratio of tank filling and tank draining, what we've learned through research is that the magic ratio is 5-to-1, and we have where we need 5 positives, to every single correction that we make. And so the best tool is going to be in your book on page 23. One of the things we want to establish is a mistake ritual. And I'd love you to take the opportunity to read through all of your toolkits in the Elm Tree, but understanding that mistake ritual, maybe having an opportunity to give Jesse that specific tool in order to be able to fill his tank by himself on the court or on wherever it is that he can do quickly, so that tank draining doesn't happen so quickly. So maybe instead of giving it full tank, all he needs is a top off, and he's able to do that himself. So I know I'm out of time, but so I just wanted to finish up with I really appreciate everyone's participation. There's a wealth of knowledge in your Power of Double Goal coaching. I encourage you to all go through it, and not only those that are here, take it to your assistant coaches, take it to your your coaches for your other teams, and don't be afraid to share it with the opposition. Don't be afraid to reach out, and if you know a coach on another team or another program who's having a hard time, is talking to things about his team about you or about his players, share it, because there's a lot of knowledge in there. And thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you. Okay, how did you feel doing that out loud?
That 10-minute goes fast. It actually
does. It goes very, very fast. Very fast. Give me 1 second. I'm going to let my barking dog out.
No problem.
It's so hard to imagine doing this on a screen and imagine a group, right?
Right, because I love interaction, right? So I love to be able to get up and move throughout the room and interact and see each other, raising hands and.
Yeah, that's where I'm trying to figure out where to be so I can listen. That's where that's how you know how to move on to the next point, right?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I missed that. Did you give her some feedback?
I just said I could see it's challenging to try to deliver to an imaginary crowd.
It is. Sometimes it's easier than a real crowd.
Yeah, I love a real crowd. I love that environment. I thrive off of it.
Yeah. And then Kelly, you were being both Ruben and Kelly. That was interesting.
I thought she was going to change her voice for me for a second. Whoa.
Oh, I should have. That would have been good. That would have been much better. No, it is, and I understand how awkward it is. I really do. It is, and that's why we actually decided to do this sooner in the course than we had in the past, because in the past we'd go through the whole course and then have you do this at the end. And this kind of gets the awkwardness out the first time, because there's people that when they go to do the final one, they're still like, I don't know what to do, I'm not really, and this kind of gets it out. And it just gives you a chance. Sometimes we know everything in our head, but when you actually go to articulate it, it's like, well, I don't really know how I want to say that. So right. it really helps to just rattle it off, and somehow being recorded with somebody in front of you, it makes it that much harder, I think. But it's good. It's all good. I really enjoyed what you did. I thought it was great. I think your tone is very conversational. You smile most of the time, which, there's a lot of value to that. Some people that get up to do this, they're very serious, and they're getting all the points. And I just say, just relax, just smile, just have fun with it. We're the positive coaching alliance, not the scary coaching alliance. So I like that about you. You have a good sense of humor. You have a good demeanor. Wendy, what did you? I don't know if you got to see. Did you get to see what Heather was doing or hear it?
She was going in the background, and so I was more paying attention by listening. But the flipping the switch concept is right of the tank. I have trouble with that dial, but okay, all of a sudden let's flip that switch. I think that's a easy to visualize technique. So I definitely will steal that.
Go for it.
Yeah, that's what I keep saying. Sometimes I sit there and take notes as an evaluation tool, and other times I'm stealing things from what people are saying. So I usually have 2 columns in my notes. One, great ideas, and one is, maybe you should try this. I love the NASCAR analogy. I think it's great for people to actually picture themselves in a race. And you know, in NASCAR, you need a tank of gas, and you made it a competition, because a lot of people just say, oh, what car would you rather be driving? But I like the way you put it in terms of a race, because there's a goal at the end, there's a reward, there's value to that. I was a little bit confused by the mortgage analogy. I think I understood why you were saying it, but it sort of confused me when you mixed it in with you were talking about NASCAR, and then you switched to your mortgage, and then you switched back to NASCAR. Right. So you might want to just either skip that part or just use it in another section, because I understand you were saying like bringing value to something, but I think the NASCAR race in and of itself, people know that there's big value in winning that type of a race. So
there doesn't really need to have to be like the reward at the end. They just kind of know what it is, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it just seemed a little out of place. As I said, I understood your train of thought, but it just seemed a little bit out of place.
Got it.
And the other thing too, I only have a couple little comments just to make it a little bit smoother.
Sure.
When you were talking about, you know, I like how you had half the room on a full tank of gas and half the room on an empty tank of gas. I think what I would love to see you do sooner is switch that from gas tank to emotional tank. Because you were saying like, what would they look like with a full tank of gas?
Okay.
We already got the gas tank analogy. Just say, okay, PCA, we talk about the athlete's gas tank is actually their emotional tank. So what would the player look like with a full emotional tank or half of emotional tank?
Okay.
It's funny, you're the second person that mentioned topping off the tank, or maybe you were the person that wrote it. Yeah, you said it in writing, and I was like, that's such a great, I love that. Like, just because sometimes kids just need it topped off a little bit. They don't need you to fill it up.
Right.
And I like the way you made it very conversational. You know, what drains, what fills. I like your scenario of using it with Jessie. I actually do part of my workshop that I do with the athletes and sometimes the coaches, like the high school level coaches, I will have Jessie get up. And I told you before, when I think you saw in the video where I do the basketball example. Well, sometimes instead of doing that with the crowd filling and draining, I will have Jessie acted out by someone. You know, you just missed the shot, heads down, and then I'll have one other person come up and be Jessie's coach and say, okay, coach, you're on. How do you fill a kid's tank? And just one-on-one rather than getting the whole crazy crowd involved, and pointing out the 5-to-1 ratio as they're going. Because a lot of times, I just had last week, I had a coach go, Jessie, you did a good job out there. Like almost like the Marshall video, like you did a good job out there and I'm proud of you. But, you know, and then so we brought up as a crowd, let's evaluate what the coach said. How many positives? And they said, well, he called his name. He put his arm on the back. He told him he was proud of him. He said he did a good effort out there. So that's 4. And then we talked about the word but. And that the word but actually just wiped away all those 4 that you just said. So that was a good talking point to bring up.
Great.
So it was very easy and clear with only one person rather than the crowd all yelling positives to see what do you do. He just got 4 positives right there. Take out the but. Tell Jessie maybe a technique switch he has to change, following through on a shot, getting a better angle, something like that. That's the criticism. And then end with, but I think next time you're going to hustle back on defense because that's the kind of kid you are. There's your 5. Right. So one conversation, you got 5-to-1. So just another way to do it too. The other thing I really liked is when you said, what's the first word that comes into your mind? I've never heard that done. I think that's a really good thing to think about. Your athlete's going to go out there, and what's the first thing you think? I stink. I let you down. Whereas if it was filling tanks, I'm sure the word out of your mouth would be, let's go. Let's go get them. Let's do it again. So one of the things Doc Rivers says in one of the videos that we use, he tells his son, whenever his son's like, Dad, I suck. Did you see that? I missed the shot. That guy just totally cut me off or whatever. Like the guy stole the ball from me. He says, you know what? I hope you get that chance again. I hope you get a chance to go out there after that guy again. And I've used that with my own kids when they're like, oh, I can't believe I blew that. I'm like, you know what? I hope you get that exact same shot again in tomorrow's game. Yeah. And it just changes the whole dynamic of it.
Yeah.
So my only suggestion for you would just be to try to simplify some of the language, simplify some of the activities and the questioning that you do. Believe it or not, I mean, I have training in elementary ed, and I've used more of my elementary ed training in these workshops than I have any higher education that I've ever done.
Right.
When you're in a group and you give somebody an assignment, or a question, the simpler and the clearer you can put it, even with well-educated adults. It seems that, I've asked questions before and then had the coach go, what was that again? What did you want me to do? And it seems so clear in my mind, but when you go to say it to somebody, it just gets jumbled up. So I make things very, very simple. Even if you're trying to get somewhere eventually, try to keep it simple in the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, but I really, really enjoyed it.
Do you think that, talking about the tank fillers, the tank emptiers, and what that looks like ahead of the scenario. Do you think that that makes sense?
I do.
Okay.
I do. Yeah, the scenarios actually, I mean, we used to have a scenario for every single principal, and over the years, it's been sort of shifted. The scenarios were originally used to introduce the principals, and then some of the scenarios were put after the principals to check for understanding. So technically, you would think that after going through the whole what drains a tank, what fills a tank, the truthful specific praise, the nonverbals, all of that, you would think the coach's answer for the Jesse scenario would be spot on, and it's surprising how many times it's not. So it is a good check for understanding tool if you put the scenario at the end.
I really like what you said about having like Jesse act it out and then having a coach come up and do the corrections, and then I think that's great and that's clear. Yeah, I was trying to figure out a way to get the dialogue between one another at the sitting at the tables or whatever they may be in that first word, so that everybody had a little bit of input.
Yeah. I think it's great. I think, or the other thing, and I just thought of this off the top of my head that would work for that too, is to have, if you get with a partner, one of you be Jesse, one of you be the coach, and just the two of you, talk to your player. How would you, as everybody on the left or on the right, whatever it is, decide one of you is going to be Jesse, one of you is going to be the coach, and just practice the one-on-one conversations. So that might be a way to do it too.
Right.
I've never done it, but I think it sounds like it would work out pretty well.
I think that's kind of what I was reaching for with with you and Ruben, was that dialogue as Jesse and the coach. But maybe doing it a little bit more clearer would be great.
Yeah, and actually I want to point out too, and then we'll get to Wendy. I wanted to point out too, Tex Ostvig from Minnesota went the other day, and he did something that I've never thought of before, and I actually used it in my workshop yesterday. He was talking about filling and draining tanks, and he said, what I teach my players is, if you show the other team that is trying to drain your tanks, if you make it obvious that they've drained your tank, so if you're putting your head down, nonverbals, backing up, you are filling theirs. And it was such a simple concept, and I was like, that makes so much sense, because that's what the other team wants. They are trying to drain your tank to get you rattled. So if you show them with your body language that you're frazzled and your tank is drained, you've just pumped them up. You've just handed them the win, handed them the confidence that you don't want them to have. So I thought that was great, and I used it yesterday. I had a whole group. I had about 80 boys, high school boys, and I brought that up at their workshop, and they were like, yeah, you're right. Like, I never thought about that. So I thought that was a cool thing to point out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And Heather, at the end, when you were running out of time, you did mention something about sharing this with your opposing coach. That's an interesting concept, sort of a communal, this isn't ours to keep. And, I'm happy to share what works with my coach, because I know I can beat him no matter what.
Yeah.
So that was nice. I like that.
It is. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, I just feel like a lot of times rather than the competition, we forget that it's about the kids.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, too. I mean, another thing to bring up, and that doesn't necessarily have to be necessarily with this, but a lot of times, especially with the kids, they say, who drains your tank the most? And a lot of times the kids will say their coach, which is kind of, it's just, like here we are trying to do so much, and we're trying to overcoach so much that some of this overcoaching is really criticism. And these kids are thinking, man, my coach doesn't even like me, because all my coach ever does is point out what I do wrong. So, at times we have to think, why? What's the purpose? Why are we draining their tanks?
Yeah.
Sometimes we just care way too much, and we're not letting them discover anything. We feel like we have to coach this, coach that, coach this, criticize that, where instead of just letting them play and encouraging them for what they're doing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a good train of thought or good discussion point. Who's draining them the most?
Yeah, my 10-year-old daughter and I had that conversation yesterday about. She just said the same thing. I don't even think my coach likes me, and I actually had a conversation with him, and I told him about PCA, and I let him know. I said he struggles with the younger girls, coaching the younger girls. I said maybe one thing that you can consider is, instead of worrying about disciplining and being distracted with everything that's not going well, I said, why don't you work on praising the things that you see in a practice or a game setting that you want, the behavior that you want. And then those girls who are now not getting your attention because they're not doing the things that you want will start buying in.
Right.
But if you're not giving praise to anybody, nobody feels like you like them.
Right.
And that's how my daughter, that's how she's feeling. So we actually had that conversation yesterday.
Yeah, my daughter had a very similar coach for 9th grade lacrosse last year. Negative, criticism at the dinner table. She's like, Mom, this coach he's just, all he does is criticize.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to pull out these PCA theories to explain to her. And my husband goes, would it be better if he just ignored you and didn't comment on anything you did?
Mm-hmm.
He wants you to get better. That's why he's criticizing. He's pushing you to get better. It's not a bad thing. And she was like, oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That's such a man's perspective that made so much sense to me. I was like, you're right. It'd be worse if he didn't do any coaching of you.
Right.
If he was just ignoring you, he wouldn't care.
Right.
It's that Mars versus Venus thing, right?
It's so true. It is so true. I just shut my little PCA mouth and let him take it.
No, I think PCA does put themselves behind. We get what we reward.
Yeah, it's true.
I've heard that sometimes with, I don't mean to be sexist, but when talking with guys, they don't. If you tell them too many things, they stop listening, and I know it's generalizing. But if you have a phrase like "you get what you reward," what you want to see, then you need to reward that. That's what I have found helps on all fronts, relationally.
Yeah, I say all the time the 5-to-1 ratio is brilliant on children and husbands. It works amazingly well. Try it for a week to give 5-to-1 praise, and you will get those shoes put away. The room will be clean. You'll be shocked. All right. Well, Wendy, whenever you're ready, we are ready for you.
Okay. I didn't really pay attention. I couldn't hear exactly what the rules were, but something about a buzzer, I understand, right? So.
There's no rules. Just 10 minutes. Give us what you got.
Okay. I'm trying to pull up on my iPad the slides here, but I'm sure you'll help me figure it out. Okay. Hey, welcome. We just finished. Heather, I see you out there. Kelly, I see you writing. So we've just seen how effort to learn this word and the mastery environment helps us to refocus after mistakes, and that can drive the performance we want to see from our kids, and that's what we're after as coaches, right? So flip the slide to Jesse. So you worked hard to get them to perform, but what about Jesse? I'm thinking, how many of you have an athlete like Jesse that looks like this? His scenario is Jesse hangs his head after every time he misses a shot, and as a result doesn't get back on defense. These are the kinds of kids. I don't know. Raise your hand if you ever met a Jesse, had a Jesse, coached a Jesse. Yeah, I have a daughter who was a Jesse too, and sometimes I think of these kids as their own worst enemies, and they need their coach to be their own best friend in a way that's going to help them perform. So. What do we do with these? What do we do with these Jessies? Well, the Positive Coaching Alliance has a tool that I like very much, and they call it emotional tank filling. And they point out the Jessies out there as athletes who might kind of have an empty tank. And so the second principle for the double goal coaching is called filling the emotional tank. I'm going to ask you all in the crowd, how's your tank right now? If I had to, you had to rate it. 5 being it just scored the winning goal in the national championship. I'm assuming you guys are soccer coaches. 1 being you let in the winning goal in the national championship. Where do you fall? Who has but just put up by fingers. I see a 3. And I can't really tell. Kelly, I see a 4.
I'm a 4, yep.
Okay, so feeling pretty good. So I'm feeling pretty good because we're over majority here. So you guys are filling my tank. I appreciate that. So it's a nice thing to be able to tune in, and most people, including coaches, can feel when their emotional tanks are full and not so full. And it's interesting. We can look at our athletes and often gauge the kinds of tanks they come into practice with or into games with. Any thoughts, folks, on how you might be able to gauge that in your athletes, even when they come to practice?
There's a coach that I know named Feffy Barnhill, and she shared with me yesterday that she really utilizes, she coaches high school lacrosse, and she shared with me that she actually uses her captains and her upperclassmen right when they come. They're usually the first ones to the field for warm-ups, and while they're warming up or in the locker room beforehand, she says, hey, how's it going out there? Anybody really feeling down today? Did you hear any big tests? What's going on? And she said, but the kids with social media, they know everything that's going on in all of the kids' lives so quickly that it's really easy for the kids to go, oh yeah, so-and-so broke up with their boyfriend last night, or oh, this history test was really hard today, and so the freshmen are probably really stressed out. Or so she said she really gets all the gossip on emotional tank reading, and then she said the kids that are low, she really focuses on filling their tanks before they've even asked, and she said it's like double duty filling because they're like, wow, how did she know I had such a bad day? So I thought that was really cool advice.
Yeah, Becky must be a good coach. Yeah, it's amazing how open kids are. We'll be, it's the elephant in the room. All you have to do is ask, and frequently they'll let you know how it goes. So it's in some ways I think it's the coach's job to help. I heard a coach, Heather, say top off their tank. But when they're really low, you want to be aware of it, pay attention to that. I wanted to, just for the example of, hey Mike, I'm not in my own home court here, but my scenario, I was going to take 2 phones, and if I could get 2 volunteers from the crowd, Heather, if you would set up these 2 cones very close together, basically so a soccer ball couldn't possibly squeeze through, and Kelly, seeing my other volunteer, I'm gonna hand you this. I call it the fun ball. It's a soccer nerf ball, and I'd like you to try to put the ball through those cones, from this distance. And you folks out there thinking about the emotional tanks. Kelly's just told us she's at a 4. She's going to try to put it through those cones. On the first time around, let's really drain Kelly's tank. What do you think we can do to drain Kelly's tank? Let's make it really difficult for her to feel good about herself when she shoots. I guess one could rehearse that, right? Yeah. Okay, try. What are you going to sound like? What are you going to look like? Show it to me.
Which one, the coaches or me?
I know I'm not being clear because of the crowd. It would be the coaches, yes.
Okay.
So we're seeing that, right? I'm hoping, this is offline, right? I'm hoping to hear them and see them. And so that was great, folks. I see a lot of hand motions, the nonverbal. That's an excellent thing to remind ourselves here that it's not just the verbal things we're saying; it's also the physical that we show. Okay, so Kelly, go ahead, put it through those cones.
Kick.
And crowd, let her have it. Heather, did she make it?
Nope.
No. So I guess probably in this scenario I would have you railing on her too, right? So what would you have to say to dunk her in the tank?
Come on, Kelly. That's like the easiest shot ever. How could you possibly miss that?
You're so close, Kelly. How could you possibly miss? Right. Okay. And now we're going to put those cones wider, right? So it makes it a little bit easier for Kelly to put the ball through. Kelly, go ahead. Now it's even before Kelly shoots. Why don't we? This is a penalty kick. It's a wide goal. Let's fill Kelly's tank before she shoots. Okay, folks, let her have it.
Go, Kelly. You can do it. You got this.
You've made this every single time. This is an easy shot. All of that. Okay, Kelly, did you make it?
Of course I did.
Of course you did. Feeling good about yourself. So Kelly, how did that feel? Those 2 experiences?
Much different. Well, the second time I had more of a chance because the cones were further apart, so I felt pretty good going into it.
So maybe that's not the best scenario. But what I want to use that to demonstrate is that I think when a player is in an environment where their emotional tank is empty, it feels like the cones are very close together. It's very it's easy to be pessimistic. They give up. How in the world coach am I ever going to make that? No matter what you're going to tell them, it's not going to go in. It's easier for them to be optimistic and think positively when the cones are further apart. And that's a visual for, I think, that emotional tank that's now fuller makes them more likely to perform the way you want them to perform. I did. So we've seen a little bit about how to fill emotional tanks, and on page, I think it's 31 in your manuals, you can see, and I love Tex gave us an example, a coach that I heard recently, that there were 4 ways, particularly 4 categories of things that we could use to fill emotional tanks with our athletes to help them perform better. And he used the analogy pals. So that's a good way to remember it. That praise, obviously we think of praise, but it has to be truthful and specific. So if we have empty praise or the good job, good effort, that was nice, but nothing specific, or if it's Kids know lies when they hear them, or they hear hollow praise and know that. So that's the key. Appreciation. That's something even ahead of time, before they even shoot or before they take the field. I sure appreciate the hard work that you put in, team, this week. I know that's your, win, lose, or draw, that you guys are going to put in the kind of effort that I saw all week long. Listening is the third, the L in pals. This is something I think we forget. I know I forget the idea that we don't need to tell so much, we don't need to speak so much, that asking questions and letting kids give feedback. Coach, that goalkeeper was the goalkeeper I played club against. They know I always go to the right. That's a great coaching moment to say, well, let's this week let's practice going to the left so we can do that kid and perform better. The last one is an interesting one to me, and it's the S in pals. I'm gonna say show. So praise, appreciation, listening, and show with your nonverbal. It's so easy to let slip in your disbelief or your aggravation with performance with the nonverbal, and that can be imagined too. We can pretend that too, and I think that's the toughest for me, because if on the inside I'm angry, it's going to come out that I'm angry, even when I'm trying to give the nonverbal that I'm not. So giving all the positives. Positive Coaching Alliance has a great something they call the magic ratio, based on psychology statistics for 10 or 20 years. John Gottman, a psychologist who studied relationship, there's a magic ratio between praise and criticism that works magic. And you guys want to guess the ratio that's best, given that we have to constructively criticize, between praise and criticism. What do you think, Heather? Numbers, yes.
3 to 1.
3 to 1. So three criticisms to 1 praise?
We can flip that.
I didn't ask my question well, so Kelly, what do you think?
I think as long as you do 2, at least double the amount of praise, I think you'll be okay.
Yeah, that's what I would think too. I would even think 1 to 1. The magic ratio that PCA has found is 5 to 1, which is crazy, right? Because you've got 20 athletes or 25 athletes and just you. So trying to shell out 5 praises for every 1 criticism is going to be tough to do. So we need some help. Who else is on the field that might help us? Anybody have some thoughts on that?
Teammates.
Other players, yeah.
Okay, so I'm almost to the end, right?
That's okay. You can finish. You can finish.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. At games too, the practices, the players can help pump each other up with all of those, not just the high fives count, the positive comments count, the hey captain, answering questions counts. I've used to great success a tool that Positive Coaching Alliance uses, which is positive charting, where I hand out a sheet to a parent on the sidelines and have them looking for 2 or 3 things with each player during the game that can be positives, and they give me that sheet, and during the first water break in the next practice, I used the positive chart, and those kids, we used to call them good things. So we sat down to hear our good things, and every kid wanted their opportunity to be on the podium to receive their good things. Amazing how that turns performance around. So that's what we like to, we need to fill the kids' emotional tanks so they don't frame their own, they don't let their day drain their own. And they can put that behind them so that they can play the way they know they know how to. And keep performing and keep sticking with us, because we know mistakes happen and we need to be able to recover them. We need to, what's the word? You see, it's at the end, right? We need them to be able to come back from where they've been.
Mm-hmm.
I love the question Kelly Kratz gave me, right? Would you want to be coached by you? Right? Let's all ask that question.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, folks.
All right. Thank you. Well done. Well done. Even in the midst of packing, you did it well.
Yeah, a little off. Sorry. Thanks.
I see the palm tree shadows in the background. I'm jealous. All right. Did you think it felt fast? Did it feel like 10 minutes, Wendy, or did you feel like you were rushing through, or did you feel good?
I mean, that would be always my one challenge, is figuring out what the timing is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I felt like I would get those sooner. So I was at the end of what I thought I was going to say, but I think the meat of the discussion is at the end, so less time to the top.
I thought it seemed fine. I don't think you felt like you were rushing at all, and you got through a lot of information in a short amount of time. So I thought you did really well with that. Heather, do you want to point out something you really liked about what Wendy did?
Yeah, actually, I thought it was really good. I liked a couple of things you did. I loved how you talked about the cone scenario being, wider cones when you're full tank and smaller area. I thought that was really, a really good point. And then, I love the PALS reference. And I think that you offered a lot of really good information just about PCA and the opportunities and the kind of the dialogue. The only suggestion that I would offer is that in the beginning you talked about PCA as a they and PCA as a we, just because you're PCA. So remembering that we at PCA, because that's ultimately the goal, is to be that we're going to be we's. So that was the only really area that I felt could be improved. I thought you did an excellent job.
I agree with that as well. I didn't even pick up on the we thing. Usually I do pick up on that. I also like it too when I hear trainers say like we as coaches, because it's sort of that we're all in this together. We're a coach, I'm a coach, you're a coach. So I think that's good too. I put down a couple nuggets. I think I call them nuggets, things I want to remember. When you said that Jesse, he's his own worst enemy. I think that's a really sticky point to bring up, that kids, we kind of focus sometimes on who's draining the tanks and who's filling the tanks out there. But a lot of times you brought home the point twice that the kids drain their own tanks. And Jesse is one of those examples. So I thought that was a really good point to bring up. And also, I think it's a great question. How do we as coaches gauge the tank level of the athletes? I think that's a great discussion point, because a lot of us know in our minds that we have to fill tanks and the kids come with drained tanks. But how do you do that before practice starts or the game? Coming into a game, you might have your star lineup already set up. And if 4 out of 5 of them have empty tanks, that might not be the starting lineup you were hoping for. So I thought that was great too. I think, I agree with Heather. I think the cone analogy is great. I think, just smoothing it out, how to explain it a little bit more clearly. Yeah. It's a great idea, and it's the visual. Yeah, absolutely. And maybe putting the cones at the same spot, going through the whole scenario, and then at the end saying, okay, when the kids' tanks are drained, that's the way the goal looks for them. When the kids' tank is full, that's the way the goal looks. So maybe just waiting until the end to show that kind of visual. I think that's a great one to put in. I like the PALS too. I thought that was good. And I also like, positive charting. I love it when you put in a tool that you actually use and you've seen it used, and this is something that works, and bringing the girls up at the end and talking about the good things that they do. I think anytime you can give real examples of things you do in your coaching experience is really great. The other one that I did just thought of it while you were saying it early on. You were talking about filling tanks and draining tanks, and I've seen trainers ask, and I think it's a great question. What, as people, just as parents and coworkers and whatever, what fills your tank and what drains your tank throughout a day? And it's kind of a good discussion to hear from us. Like, well, what drains my tank is when, I've done something wrong at work, or I'm hungry, or I got in an argument with one of my kids or my husband or whatever. Just to talk about as people, just not in sports, just what drains your tank in life. And think of somebody that's filled your tank recently. What have they done to fill your tank? And just bring up some examples of that, and then that can be a great analogy for sports. We know what fills our tanks, we know what drains our tanks, but why as coaches do we feel like screaming at the kids is going to help them if we know it doesn't help us? So I thought that might be something good to mention as well. But I liked it. I thought you did a good job. I thought, there wasn't anything that I thought that you could definitely work on that had to be better. I thought it all was very clear and easy to understand. I can't wait to hear more. I do these 10-minute things, and then I'm like, I want to hear more. I want to hear the next one.
It's good stuff. It's a challenge to make it your own, though, rather than to follow, obviously the presenters done it many times. So.
And it is here. There's some excellent trainers that follow exactly the way we do it. They follow the PowerPoint to the T. It is encouraged, and we do have notes in there so that you can do that. It's just that everybody's coming from a different coaching background, different experience, and that's more of the connection to the audience piece that we'd like you to put in there. But we don't want you to feel like you have to reinvent the wheel, because this is a program that's been evolving over 12 years, and it even still evolving. We're actually going through for 2016, evolving this PowerPoint even more. So it's going to be changing. It's it's very fluid, and it changes probably every 2 years or so when we just want to update it, put in some new videos and some new, it didn't even used to have videos at all. When I first started with PCA, there were no videos. So that was something that we added in, and the scenarios are a little bit different. So
at the end of this PowerPoint, there's a picture of the girls carrying the ACL softball player around. I wasn't sure. And then is there a video as part of the next part of it? I wasn't, okay.
There is, yeah. It's the video should be after it, and it should play automatically for you, yeah. And we're actually updating that video as well. ESPN has a different edited video of that, and it actually shows the umpires. It's an interview with the umpire that was there that day, and an interview with their coaches. So that's something that we're going to be working into the new Double Goal Coach Workshop. It's just a little bit of a different view on it, rather than just focusing on the players. So we might use the players one for the athlete workshops, and then get into the umpire and the coaches one and use that for the coaches workshops.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So yeah, it's pretty neat.
Yeah, I saw that. I didn't see it live, but I saw it when it was first news, and people brought it to my attention because I work with ACL athletes.
Oh, okay.
And so that was that.
It is. But it's funny, I mean, that's been like one of our signature videos for years now, since 2010, I think is when we started using it. And there's, partners that have said, can you get a new video? I mean, it's such a great illustration of honoring the game, but there's a lot more that have come up in the news. So
what about the Lauryn Hill with her, their opponents in tears and, just absolutely loving that moment for her. I think that was a very powerful video that speaks to honoring the game.
It is. There's another one, too, from San Antonio, Texas, about a manager that had special needs, and the coach put him in for the last, I don't know if you saw that one, and the player from the opposing team passed him the ball.
Yes.
The one thing that we try to stay away from slightly are all the special needs videos, because a lot of the things that we teach are honoring your opponent, even if your opponent is a complete jerk, best player on the team. So a lot of times, like, your heart automatically breaks for kids that have special needs that are elevated and people are honoring them, or somebody that is sick. And I think those videos are great. I mean, they make me cry every time. But one of the critiques has been, let's just stick with the athlete that, the average athlete that everybody's playing against any given moment. It doesn't have to be, because, I mean, I hope every single player out there would have done what that player did for a manager with special needs that finally got in that game. Like, if you don't, you're a real jerk. But if it was just a regular old player, would the opposing team have played him the ball, passed him the ball? Maybe not.
Right.
So that's where we're talking about moral courage, not just doing the right thing. It's you have the courage to stand up and do something that's right, even when everybody else would say it was wrong.
Yeah.
So, but there's great videos out there. All right. Well, 1 o'clock, we have another batch coming in. If you guys, I know, Wendy, you've got nothing better to do, so you're welcome to just hang out with us all day. And
with the palm trees here. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm glad I could catch up with you, and I'm glad I could see you face to face, Heather. And Kelly, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Wendy.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, for the input, and
sure.
It was great to go through it with you, and thank you, Wendy, as well.
Yeah, I'm glad Wendy jumped in. I don't know what happened to Kris.
Yeah, we had Kris and Laurel.
Lorena, yes, from Mexico City. I'm not sure what happened to them, but we have Mason and Mike, and Wendy already went, so we're good. Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, Heather. Mike, are you there? Hey, Mike, how are you?
Hey, good. How you doing?
Good. Glad to see you got on
No one
today.
else?
What?
What?
Well, there are
sorry.
people, there are other, Mason is supposed to come on. I think
Okay.
it's Mason, let me check. Yes, Mason as well, and Wendy went earlier. She asked if she could go a little bit earlier because she's in the process of moving, so it's,
Oh.
we'll give Mason another minute and then we'll get
Okay.
started. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't heard back from her otherwise, so it should work out.
Mason's her? Oh.
Mason Kathy, yes. Her first name is Mason and her last name is Kathy. And I called her Kathy Mason for the first couple emails that I ever sent to her, realizing that I thought her name was Kathy Mason, but I'm sure she gets that a lot.
Plus, Mason's usually a boy, isn't it?
I know.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. It must be fun.
It is. It's hard too when you get a trainer application and nowhere on the trainer application does it say male or female. So all the questions we never bother to ask if you're a male or female. We usually can figure it out. But she was a track runner too, so it wasn't like we could tell from her sport that she played. She was like a basketball and track. I'm like, that doesn't even help. So the first time I called her, I was like, okay, you're a female.
Better change that app.
I know, no kidding. I finally asked her to put the date on. I never thought to put male or female. Good thing to put on there. So sorry about what happened last time. I hope I appreciate you trying this again.
Oh, yeah, I rebooted my, well, I might have emailed you. Oh, don't tell me it went away again. No, that was.
No, we're good. You're good.
Okay. I think we hadn't restarted the computer in a long time because it took forever to reboot. And,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I don't know. But, and actually, too, I got the PowerPoint printed instead now.
Oh, okay.
It's just easier to look at, I guess, than looking at the screen.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, it's only the four, was it 4 slides?
Yeah,
right?
it's not very many. That's why we do it with this principle, because it's very few slides.
You know, speaking of that, the slide numbers, I'd have to find it again, but my numbers are different than what something's, has it been changed probably?
It may have been updated.
Because there's something that says, I forget now, maybe like slide 18, and it's not my 18, it's something different.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it could have been my error too, because I have the PowerPoint that I've been using probably for a little while now. So if the one that I probably sent you was the most updated, and I might have one on my computer that's a little bit older version, so
Okay.
it could just be my mistake. No problem. Hi, Mason. How are you?
Hi, good, thank you.
Good. We're here with Mike from Cleveland.
Hi, Mike.
Right.
So on the schedule, Mason, you were supposed to go first. It's up to you if you guys want to fight it out, or if you want Mike to go first, because it's first come, first serve, whichever you'd like to do. It's fine with me.
Mike, what do you think?
Whatever you like, doesn't matter to me.
I thought you'd both be jumping at the chance.
Oh.
I mean, I can get started.
Either way, I don't care.
Okay, well, let's go to ladies first, because Mason was on the
All right.
schedule first, if you don't mind.
All right. Okay.
And Mason, do you need to see my PowerPoint at all, or are you okay?
If it is up there, it's helpful for cues.
Okay. Yeah, I have it, so I can pull it over to you. And if you need to see it, all you have to do is click on my picture down below.
Right.
It'll make it bigger for you. And then just tell me if you want to tell me when to click or whichever.
Nope, that's good.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
All right. So what I've been doing, Mason, just to let you know, and Mike already heard my spiel, but we're just giving people 10 minutes just to give you an idea of time frame. So when you do this in a regular workshop, you'd probably have about 15, you'd probably have a little bit longer to do this entire principle. But we're just keeping it to 10 just to give you a chance to just get some of your words out and start practicing, you know, the language and some of the ideas that you might have. It's funny because a lot of the people that have gone already have, first of all, they've gone, wow, 10 minutes goes really fast. And the next thing they've said is, you know, sometimes you have ideas in your head, but it's until you go to articulate them and the sentence doesn't come out right or something, like, wow, I got to work on how to say that. So it's just a good way to get you guys used to this format, too, of doing this by video, which is different than doing it, obviously. It'd be easier if you had a live audience in front of you. But Mike and I will try to be whatever audience you'd like us to be. We can be whatever coaches you want us to coach, whatever age. We are. I've actually just played 2 people in the last hangout. I was Ruben and Kelly. So whoever you want me to be is fine with me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I've not practiced this verbally. I've thought about it, but I've definitely not spoken it multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
And even, something like I've listened to a couple other people give their presentations, or even like watching the Republican national debate last night. Like, you see, some of them are very polished and very clean speakers, and others, maybe there's just a phrase or two in there that just kind of wrecked their entire delivery.
Mm-hmm.
So, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to all of us and let us get a chance to really practice.
Yeah, no problem. I'm picking up as many ideas from this course as I have from, certified trainers. It's great. I always have like my little notebook where I jot down ideas, like maybe you didn't use the right language. Like a lot of it's just getting used to the PCA terminology for a lot of these things that you're talking about. But my other side of my column is stealing ideas from all of you. So it's working out well for me too.
Yeah.
So I have a timer that'll go off in 10 minutes, but don't feel like you have to get stopped mid-sentence. Just finish your sentence or your thought or wherever you are. Okay? So whenever you're ready, you can get started.
All right.
I'll start here. If you want me to start the first one. That was from the last one, and then is this where you want me to start?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Mike, I don't know if you're familiar, but Kelly, I believe, is. My name is Mason, as you probably saw, and I predominantly coach cross country and track and field. So I thought rather than try to spin off and do kind of a sport where it's a team sport and a little bit kind of maybe more familiar, I was just going to go with what I'm more familiar with. So you all today would be more of an audience of cross country or track and field coaches. So getting started with that, kind of how we're going to be looking at a little bit of this conversation today. So starting off there with slide 18 or 19, whichever it is, Kelly. As we look at these 2 slides, we have, I think, a pretty obvious distinction. We've got a slide on the left that is a gas gauge that is empty, and then you've got a slide on the right where obviously you've just filled it up with a complete tank of gas. I can only think of one scenario, which I would not prefer to be the tank on the right. But how about you? How about you, Kelly? How about you, Mike? Which tank would you, if you're driving on the highway, which car would you rather be in? The car on the left or the car on the right?
I'd rather be in the one on my left, but you're right.
Yeah,
the full one.
The full tank. Yeah. So absolutely. I think when you're driving a full tank, at least for me, I always know that in that situation I feel very prepared. I feel perhaps optimistic about being able to get done the things that I want to get done, and I feel, a little bit confident in I'm taking care of business. How would you feel, Mike, if you were driving in the car that was on E?
Worried, stressed.
Huh? Kelly, how about you?
I get anxious and wonder how much further I can go.
Yeah.
How far can I push it?
Yeah, I start to feel a little bit frazzled. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, really? I'm an adult. Can I not just fill up my gas tank? And it's actually a situation that we come into regularly down here in Florida, whether you're driving across Alligator Alley and for about 60 miles there's not but one gas station, or if you're going over some long stretches where there's a bridge. And it always will kind of give you that long bridge ahead, check your gas tank. And speaking of checking a gas tank, I think it is very important to focus on these sort of ideas when you are approaching practice. And so what we're talking about here is filling your emotional tank, or filling an athlete's emotional tank, or how they're arriving at practice with their emotional tank. Have there been all sorts of distractions throughout the day that have thrown them off, kind of not have them focused for practice? Are they not compartmentalizing and they're showing up still thinking about something either terrific or even terrible that happened earlier in the day, and so they're not quite as present at practice? That's the idea of what we're talking about here, is having a full emotional tank. Mike, you mentioned, or Kelly, you mentioned kind of feeling anxious or nervous or worried. what are some other ideas that you might have if your tank is full? How would you be showing up to practice either as, say, a coach for practice that day if your emotional tank is full?
Oh, I'd hopefully be positive and energetic. Look like I want to be there.
Yeah, that's, I think, definitely a really good point there, Mike, is you show up fully engaged with what you're going to be doing over the next hour, hour and a half, whatever it is. You're ready to listen, and you're ready to really just interact with each of the athletes. So, yeah, definitely whether you're a coach or you're an athlete, I think it's really important to be aware of your E-tank level, and also then be able to figure out if it's not at full, what are some different ways maybe that we can possibly inch it up a little bit closer to full. So let's do a quick practice session here. Let's imagine you're at a meet, a cross country, or let's say even a track meet, and you've got your team there, and the cross country meet lines up, and it's team against team, and you're ready to go. As a coach, you feel like you've been showing up every day, you've been doing your best job. You feel like your athletes are prepared. The gun goes off, and you see your 7 athletes, take off down the straightaway. The race is progressing along, and 2 or 3 of your athletes are just completely not doing what you asked, or they're completely not performing to their level of ability like maybe they have earlier in the season. The race finishes. You've got some athletes that have done well and some athletes that have not done so well. Can you tell me a little bit about how you might try and approach this situation? Mike, how about?
I would think. Okay, I was going to say I'd be really excited about the kids that did really well, that did what I asked them to do, and I'd make sure that I pointed out exactly what they did well. And it's tough, because it's a team. So the kids that didn't do so well, I might ask them some questions like, "What happened? How do you think you did? What was going on?"
And Mike, let's for a minute pretend like you just missed out on qualifying for the next meet because these 2 athletes didn't run to their potential.
Oh, they're cut.
Yeah, they're cut, right? Like, what else? Looking at them, you're frustrated with them. What do you, let's say you want to drain their E-tank. What are you going to say to them?
If I want to drain their tank?
Yes.
I'd say I try to avoid that, but what's the problem? Why are you so slow today? Or what's going on?
Yeah, definitely. And I think another one that I often see is those kids are often just ignored, because the coach can focus on the kids that did well and maybe doesn't approach the kids that didn't do so well. So what else, Kelly, do you think, what could you do maybe that just shows those kids, that you're really upset with them?
As Mike said, you could just cut them, ignore them, forget it, next race. You're not, and I think just showing them, like shaking your head, like you're spending all your attention with the kids that did well, and you're just completely ignoring the other ones, or even yelling at them, coming right over and saying, "What were you thinking? What were you doing? You didn't do anything I asked you to do."
Yeah, so I think that question exactly of what were you doing is a little bit of a, well, not even a little bit, but a very large part of a depletion mode. That's something that can quickly drain somebody's tank, their E-tank. So whether it be ignoring, whether that's sort of like using sarcasm or using some sort of nonverbal cue, an athlete can get very, very or more disengaged or more upset, and it's not going to help them prepare for one of the next meets. It's shown in research, a nonverbal cue is maybe 8 to 10 times more lasting, or an athlete remembers a nonverbal cue 8 to 10 times longer than they would some sort of a verbal cue. What would you say, Mike? You've got maybe 2 athletes on your team that did not run well. What would you say that you could do to fill their E-tank after that race? Maybe you guys have qualified, even though those 2 didn't run well. maybe you've qualified onto the next meet, and so you've got to count on these two to run at your regional meet. What are you going to say to those two athletes that ran really poorly to kind of boost them back up or fill that E-tank?
Right. We try to support them, and maybe actually just came to mind because we're doing this as the mistake ritual thing. If they can just shake off their bad performance, and you can't change what's already done now, so they need to prep as much as they can and to perform like they want to next time because they have another chance. So just try to support them into doing better next time and giving it their all.
Yeah, definitely. I think being truthful and telling them something like that, what they do have coming ahead, and also giving them some specific direction. Maybe one or two things that they did well during the race and one thing that they need to work on.
Yeah. I don't know much about running, but like if they had a good middle stretch maybe, or if they were, do you guys break it up into like beginning, middle, and end, so if they had a strong finish, that'd be good to keep that up, or maybe that was their problem and they need to work on their finish, something like that?
Yeah, and so sometimes maybe they had a great start and, then they didn't have a great finish. You can focus that they were aggressive, and they got out. So being able to find one or two good points and kind of make that criticism sandwich can go a long way. There's one other piece of research that we'll discuss here it's called the magic ratio of how many times you're going to essentially kind of start to fill somebody's E-tank versus how many times you can deplete it and you're still really getting through to that athlete. Can you both take a guess at about, well, maybe not Kelly or Mike, but actually could you both take a guess at what you think?
2 to 1.
2 to 1.
I think it's going to be a little higher. I think 3 to 1.
No way.
Okay. So 2 to 1, I would say Mike is a really good guess because I was just discussing that criticism sandwich. You give them a positive and then possibly a critique and then another positive.
Oh,
but actually all the research shows making it more of a 5 to 1 ratio. So 5 positive comments or 5 constructive comments for one criticism or one critique or one piece of feedback that's going to kind of hit on one of their more sensitive subjects. So the magic ratio, so is 5 to 1. And as it's been pointed out, it doesn't mean that you need to do 5 all at once and then 1 to follow up. It's just an overall, maybe in the course of a week or so, is that magic ratio of 5 to 1.
All right, thank you. I think you did well with the 10 minutes. You fit it all in. I mean, that's the last slide, so that was great. Is there anything more that you would have done after that you didn't have time for?
Well, I maybe would have gone into mistake ritual.
Yeah, and just giving examples. That's the only thing I would have said to go further is just give examples of specific things you can do to up that 5, that number 5. You can, use names, thumbs up, put your hand on their shoulder. There's a lot of things. You can buddy systems, have them with a partner, shout outs and things like that, and demand that the parents and the fans don't yell any negatives. That's a 5 to 1 ratio booster right there. Can you guys just help me out for the second half? Not one negative coming out of your mouth. I really need to boost this ratio up. And parents are like, all right, if I have to. It's hard for them, but gives them a challenge. I thought you did a really nice job. I really like your delivery. I thought you were very clear. You weren't rushing. Your voice is very articulate. I'd love to see you smile more. Every once in a while, you threw a smile in there, and I was like, oh, you look so serious the other time. So use your smile. Yes. It's helpful. It puts everybody, it relaxes everybody, I think. Mike, what did you like specifically about what Mason did?
Oh man, I think you just said it. As far as maybe getting what she did well, yeah, explaining the racial thing. Actually, only had a couple minutes of that. I think that's important. I guess is the whole. I like the criticism sandwich myself, and then making sure you get to 5 to 1. Because 5 to 1's a lot. I think in most people's opinion anyway. That's why I said 2 to 1, because I think a lot of people, including myself, except I know about, I'm trained in behavior psychology, so this is sort of the same thing in a different language. But 2 to 1, I think, and most people would say that's plenty. 2 compliments to 1 criticism. I think common sense wise, a lot of people would say that's plenty, and it's not even half.
Now, do you find in your behavioral psychology research that it's still closer to a 5 to 1 ratio is what they recommend?
I've never seen actual numbers, and actually, I should say I haven't worked in it in a long time, but I'm trained in it years ago, and but the whole point of it's something like that. I don't remember seeing numbers actually of a ratio, but just the whole positive reinforcement is what this is about actually, and then so you gotta like the thing that always comes to mind is catch them being good. Because the problem is like as parents or coaches is it's easy to criticize, right? You find something they're doing wrong and you say, hey, that's not right. We forget to say what they are doing right. We always called it catch them being good, and you had to make sure that you reinforce what they are already doing well. Yeah, there's room for improvement, but maybe they're getting 2 out of the 3 things right, or whatever it is, 3 out of the 6 things right, and then you want to keep those right things going. So you gotta complement or reinforce those, and the whole 5-to-1 ratio, you got to do it with some being delicate about it, so you don't totally discourage them and then just focus on the negatives.
Yeah. And just to give you some background too, the reason that PCA has 5-to-1 is because the research that they found over 20 years of research by all these different sources, some in marriages, some in children, some in sports, have said that in order to increase performance dramatically, the closer you get to a 5-to-1 ratio, the better performance is going to be. Some have said 7-to-1 ratio. Others have said 3-to-1 works. So we sort of pick that number in the middle, 5-to-1, because in athletics, that balance and that ratio is where we've seen athletes dramatic difference in their performance, dramatic difference on how quickly they pick up skills. When it is a 2-to-1, it's good. When it's a 3-to-1, it's good. When it's a 4-to-1, it's still good. But for some reason, that number 5 seems to be magical. When you get to that number of positives to critiques in any type of a relationship, it doesn't have to be in one practice, but in the overall relationship, that's when the performance has just skyrocketed. It's just improved dramatically. So that's the reason, just if anybody asks, that's the reason for the 5-to-1. I thought also, Mason, what? I'm sorry.
So you were telling them to shoot for 7? Because, you shoot for 5 and you'll come up short. So, like, if you want to have people drive 65, have the speed limit be 55.
Right. That's true, especially going through Alligator Alley.
Yeah.
I have driven through Alligator Alley in a very, not a car with full gas, but not a very reliable car when I was in college, and it was a little scary. I thought that was great, the way you brought that in. I mean, that is so, the fact that you're from Florida and you're going to be talking to people from Florida, I think that's great. That's realistic. You don't want to run out of gas there. On the long bridges, you don't want to run out of gas. I really like the way you asked how you feel, because that's really important. Everybody understands, a full tank goes a long way, empty tank doesn't, but I like the way you thought, how are you actually feeling when you're driving? Elizabeth Hammondtree, who's also from Florida, she did hers the other day, and she said, when I'm driving and I have an empty tank, I feel like the end is in sight. And I thought that was a really good analogy as an athlete, to think, you're going out there, you're playing, but at some point I'm going to hit a wall, and I'm just not going to have anything left in me to give. So I thought that was a good analogy, too. The other thing that you actually started talking about was coaching with a full tank. And I think that's a really good point to bring up, that as coaches, sometimes we show up and our tank is drained. You've had a long day, you've got a life, you've got families, and sometimes things are just, not good for you. So recognizing your own tank level is really important so that you can, get yourself in the right mindset to coach. Another thing I like to bring up with coaches, too, is who else has emotional tanks? That you have to not only gauge the emotional tank level of your players, but who else has emotional tanks? Well, the parents, the umpire, the referee, the coaches, the kid. There's a lot of emotional tanks going on. So when you're getting upset at someone else's behavior, it could be that their tanks are pretty low or not full. I really like the way also that you were talking about, where did I put it? Where did I put it? I put it somewhere else. Just the conversation, just the way you were very clear, and you asked a question, but then you said, oh, Mike, give me your opinion, or Kelly, give me your opinion. I think anytime you give names to people and make them feel personally involved and invited into the conversation, I think that's really helpful. The one suggestion that I would give is to have more specific examples. So if you're talking about filling tanks and draining tanks, give examples. I might say to that, like you had us ask for examples, like what would I do, and the one sentence I probably wouldn't say it that way when you said, what would you say, Mike, if you want to drain the kid's tank?
Okay.
And he was like, well, I don't want to do that, but instead of saying what would you say if you want to drain the tanks, maybe say what would you say that could drain a kid's tank, or something, just a little bit different than that. But I would give an example, because you are a cross country and a track coach. So after you hear examples from us, I want to hear what Mason, the expert cross-country coach would say? How would you handle it? How would PCA recommend you handle it? So I think that's what I'd love to see, more specific examples. I would go over to the kids that didn't do so well, and I'd point out, even though they didn't get the time they wanted to get, what did they do right? Well, they kept up their pace. I noticed their arms moving the right way. I noticed that they were really, whatever they did well, I think it's important to bring up. And interestingly, I find with runners, like runners, swimmers, any of those sports that are timed, and any of those well, cross country is a little different because it's a team, but a lot of times it's not easy to flush a mistake because you've got the rest of the race going on. So I think it's more difficult, and I brought that up at different workshops before. When you're talking about basketball, yeah, you're going to get another shot. Soccer, you get another shot, whatever it is. But when you're doing like an endurance type sport, I think that's when it's even more important to point out to fill the tank, because they've got to have their tank fill in order to finish the race or do the next event. So I think that's an interesting point to bring up for runners and swimmers and whatever other sports are timed. So, all right, well, nice job.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, you ready to go?
Sure.
Okay. We're all ears.
Okay. Do you want to put the... Doesn't matter to me. Yeah, if you want to put that back to the... Okay.
Do you want that one, or do you want to start right here?
That's good. The gauges is good.
Okay.
Because I would just say, coming out of the first principle, I'd say, well, now let's look at the second principle of positive coaching. Take a look at these two gas gauges. Which one would you prefer the one in your car to look like? I'd get some crowd.
Full.
Yeah, of course, the full one. And why? Well, because you can go further, and because it doesn't cause you stress like the empty one does. So I go to the next slide. The second principle of positive coaching is filling the emotional tank of our players. We all have emotions, and if this gauge is measuring positive emotions, we want to help keep our athletes' tanks full. Why? Well, because when the positive emotional tank of kids are low, they tend to be pessimistic, they give up more easily, and they're less coachable. However, with full E tanks, they tend to be optimistic, they handle adversity better, and they're more coachable. So with full E tanks, kids are more able to actually hear what you say to them and are more likely to do what you ask without resisting. Many coaches believe the most important thing you can do to help your team learn and perform well is to fill their emotional tanks as much as possible. And I'd go to the next slide. So if having full emotional tanks improves performance, we as coaches want to do things that help fill the tank and avoid doing things that drain that tank. So what are those things? Well, let's first start with the tank drainers, such as criticism and correction, sarcasm, ignoring players, and other nonverbal actions such as frowning or rolling your eyes. Now what fills that E-tank? Praise, but only a certain kind of praise. It must be truthful and specific to be effective. So saying good job is not the praise we're looking for because it's too ambiguous. It's too vague. The player likely won't know what action actually earned the good job, and it can also be taken as insincere, like the coach didn't really mean it. It was just something to say. So instead, say good job at whatever they did well. Maybe they got back on defense quickly. They tried to save a ball from going out of bounds. Used a bounce pass when they should have. Whatever they've been working on. Maybe screening the goalie in hockey, setting the pick in basketball. Whatever it is, be specific about the praise that you give. Because truthful and specific praise tends to fill tanks, while criticism and correction tend to drain tanks. So now you may be thinking, but isn't critiquing and correcting our players an important part of coaching? Absolutely it is. But we want you to understand it's not the only form of useful feedback we can give our players. There's the whole other side of providing praise for specific things that they're doing well. And this is important because that helps fill their tanks. Critiquing them, on the other hand, even though it is necessary, tends to drain their tanks. So it's important to have the proper balance of praise and correction in order to keep those tanks full. Now, most of us have no problem critiquing and correcting our players, so we're usually good tank drainers. So it's very important to remember to refill what we've drained, and we can do this by listening to our players' input, expressing appreciation through specific praise. Remember, it's got to be specific, or even non-verbally by clapping, smiling, giving high fives or fist bumps, stuff like that. And I go to the magic ratio slide. So hopefully now you're thinking, okay, I understand I need to sprinkle positive praise in with my critiquing in order to keep the tank full, but how much? Do I get one critique per practice, one per week? What's the proper balance? Any guesses? And then I Ask the crowd. You got Kelly, Mason, any ideas?
2 to 1.
I hear 2 to
17 to
1.
1.
I hear 17 to 1. 3 to 1.
Do I hear 20?
And you never get higher than 5, right? I imagine from the crowd.
I've got 10 to 1. Somebody said to me one time.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be unusual, though, right? I would think.
Some guy one time said like 7 to 3. I was like,
Okay. 3.98 for you.
yeah, exactly.
Well, it's 5 to 1, and that's 5 tank fillers to 1 tank drainer. We call this 5 to 1 ratio the magic ratio because when coaches get close to it, magical things can happen. Kids who don't seem very motivated get excited and end up doing things even they didn't think they could do. So why 5 to 1? Where did that come from? Well, the magic ratio is scientifically based, as there's a body of research that shows the 5 to 1 ratio produces the best results in the classroom, the office, in relationships and marriages, and in coaching. As an example, research has shown that school children thrive in the 5 to 1 ratio, and that a 2 to 1 ratio is not enough. At only a 2 to 1 ratio, the researchers describe the kid's attitude as despairing. Well, that's not what we want, right? So think about that for a moment. 2 to 1 means 2 out of 3 of your comments are E-tank fillers, and that's not enough. 2 out of 3 is 67%. I would have thought that's plenty. That's more than half. It seems like that should be enough, doesn't it? Well, it's not. 5 to 1 is the magic ratio, and 5 to 1 means 5 out of 6, which is 83%. A great example of that is John Wooden, who used the magic ratio for years to create a winning culture at UCLA, as 85% of his feedback to players was of the tank filling variety. So, Mason might not be old enough, but maybe you've heard that 4 out of 5 dentists recommend try it. Remember that 5 out of 6 is the magic ratio to keep that emotional tank full. So now getting to a 5 to 1 ratio may not seem easy, especially since we do need to correct and critique our players to help them improve. But remember that any tank filling counts, including all the positive nonverbals. So be aware of the nonverbal messages you send. So let's practice a bit and see how tank filling and draining will look in action. I'm kind of doing this example afterwards. So after making a mistake, where do players often look? Maybe at their coach, their parents, or maybe even hang their head and look at the ground. Well, in this demonstration, I'm going to be the player that looks to their coach, and each one of you are my coach. So here I am in the basketball game with time winding down. I have the ball, and I'm wide open to take the shot that will win the game at the buzzer. And I put it up, and I miss. Oh, I turn to my coach, who's a tank drainer, and what would that draining coach do or say, maybe? Any ideas?
Oh, what were you thinking? That was terrible.
Yeah, loser, right? Whatever. Might slam his clipboard, roll his eyes, throw his head back in disgust. Maybe lecture me as I come to the bench. You got to make that shot, right? Nothing that's going to fill the tank. That's only draining. So now let's say they have the same situation, but this time I got the open shot. I still miss, but I have a tank filling coach. What were some things that the coach could do in that situation to fill my tank? Any ideas?
Way to get the shot off, Mike. You were really aggressive in there.
You've been hitting a lot of good shots all game. Keep shooting it.
Right, that's good. Yeah, you're not going to make every one, right? I mean, applaud his effort. Give me a thumbs up maybe for a nonverbal, smiles. Those are the kind of responses that will help keep the player's tank full, which ultimately will lead to his performance being better both on and off the court, which is what PCA is all about. So, and I know that was less than 10. I was making so.
That's right. That was good. All done.
That's.
All right. Now you still had 3 minutes to spare there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why do you think yours went so quick?
Well, actually, I wrote myself a script, and the reason is because I know on that one slide it says in case there's not time at the it says to skip the demo thing. Might have to, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's the first gas slide, isn't it? Maybe it's the second one.
Yeah, I'm not sure. What, in the notes you mean on the bottom?
Yeah, because it says if yep.
Yeah, I got it.
So that was the main reason. But I should probably throw in a more, I guess, another example or two, I guess, or a situation.
I like your John Wooden example.
Mm-hmm.
I stole that's right in the PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm. That's okay. That's good.
And that's the thing, too.
No.
I was like, I don't need to rewrite what's already written, right? I mean.
Yeah. No, I think that's what I said. I told Wendy that last time. She was like, how close do we want to stick to the PowerPoint, and how much do we want to make it our own? And I said, the PowerPoint is actually something we've taken a lot of time and a lot of years to evolve, and a lot of research has gone into it. So don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. What we want you to do is bring in some of your own examples and bring in some of the examples of the audience and use their experience and your experience to dress it up, to make it more personal, to make the audience have a connection. I mean, you can definitely tell you did your homework. You know this stuff inside and out. You were very, very clear with your message. I thought you did a great job with each of the examples that you gave. The research, you brought in the research in the classroom. I think that's always great to mention that this is not just on the field, it's actually in the classroom as well. And when kids in a classroom are given 2 to 1, they're called despairing. I mean, think about that whole word is just like, ugh. And teachers giving more positives than criticisms in the classroom. Do you want your kid being taught by a teacher who's only giving 2 to 1 and your kid's saying, my teacher doesn't like me, school's terrible? No, you want your kid to be coming home from school fired up and ready to go. I thought that was great. The thing that I would recommend, though, because I wanted you to see how much time you had left in the end. We probably give about 15 minutes for this principle, and you finished the whole thing in 7 minutes. So you've got 8 more minutes of time that you could spend bringing some information out of the audience. There's your timer right there.
I think what I do is, after doing the example that's in the PowerPoint, is then go to the crowd for examples of what. Yes. And it would depend probably on if you know what sports, if it's a certain sport that's there. I guess it wouldn't matter. You'd still go to the crowd and just say, does anybody have an example of both good and bad? Because you need to see the contrast, I think, so that it drives it home. Yeah, I'm just surprised how many coaches don't know this these days, honestly.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, a lot of it, too, is because we coach the way we were coached. And I think a lot of like Phil Jackson once said, originally the whole idea of coaching was sort of a military model, where I'm the coach, I'm in charge, I bark orders, and you do what I say. So this whole idea of filling up emotional tanks and rewarding effort and all that wasn't the way it worked. I mean, it was just the same as, 15, 20 years ago, there was no positive reinforcement for a dog. If you were trying to teach a dog a trick, you weren't saying, good dog, good dog. You were disciplining. That's how they taught all the police dogs all the tricks. It was all discipline. It was all negative. And then they found out the police dogs were only able to work in the police business for 7 years. When the dog whisperer, Cesar Millan or whoever came along and said, let's be positive with the dogs are learning quicker, they're being trained faster, and the dog's work life is about 13 years right now. So I know the kids you're coaching aren't dogs, but it is an interesting phenomenon to see actually the longevity of a career in, dog police officer-ness is doubled by positive reinforcement.
Well, just like spanking's kind of fallen out of favor for parenting, or you don't get the belt out anymore like they used to, and I just thought more of that would have translated to coaching by now.
Yeah.
I think a lot of, but then you hear about ones too, like, oh my gosh, what are they doing, so.
Yeah. So I would just like to see, Mike, the very first thing I put was ask, don't tell. Ask the audience instead of telling them. Ask them first about this. So what does drain tanks? What does fill tanks? What have you seen in your players? When are your tanks drained? When are your tanks filled? So getting experience from the audience doesn't only get them involved, but it helps them to think. And we want our audience to be critical thinkers and think, okay, how can I apply this stuff? Think of a play, and I always sometimes too will say, think of a player that you have that comes to practice a lot with a drain tank. What's that player going through? What's going through his head? So when they can actually, and then think about that player. Are they playing up to their potential? Probably not. Because a lot of times it could be players that have a lot of skills, but their tank is drained and they can't do anything with it. And then it always seems like Murphy's Law. You get the kid that can't even kick a ball or run a step or take a shot, and he's the kid with all the energy and all the full tank. And gosh, if you could just get those two together, wouldn't that be awesome? So, some way to bring out examples from the audience just makes them definitely more engaged. That way our PCA talks are not a lecture. That's why we don't call them presentations or seminars or conferences. We call them workshops because we want the audience to work. We want this to be very, very interactive so that they're using their own ideas and their tools. Going back and, oh yeah, Timmy, he is the one with the drain tank. When I go back to practice tomorrow, I'm going to think about, I need to fill his tank a lot more than I've been. Let's see what happens. So that's it. But again, as I said, I think your speech was great. I mean, there weren't any words that I was like, wow, you were spot on to everything that the book says, everything the PowerPoint says. I mean, you can definitely tell, as I said, you did your homework and you're prepared. I just want to be a little more involved. It took like 6 minutes into it for you to even ask us a question. So you might end up tuning out a lot of the audience by then, especially since this is only the second principle, because you've already gone through Elm Tree of Mastery, and then you've got to go to honoring the game. So if we don't bring in some more interaction and questioning with each one, you're going to lose your audience.
Okay. I just felt like you got to kind of explain the emotional tank to them first, so I guess we could. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can still explain it very well. I just think I mean, and you can do it any way you want. I've seen other trainers that ask too many questions, and then they've lost the audience, and the audience is like, what's going on? So I think there's a good balance. Right. I think it's okay to explain it like you did. Like you even explained the slide right before this one. Where is it? No, this one here. You said kids with an empty tank will be pessimistic. They give up more easily. They're less coachable. Kids with a full tank are more optimistic. They can deal with adversity. They're more coachable. That's okay to explain that, and then say, all right, let's think about the kids you have. Think of somebody on your team. Is this true? Do you agree with this? That's even a simple question. Do you agree with this? Give me an example of a player you have. Tell me about him. Something like that. So it is clear, but and it's also could be too the way that we learn best is usually how we present our workshops. I personally learn best by being engaged and being interested. You might be the kind of person that wants everything very clearly stated right up front, and that's okay too. But there's learners that are they're all different in the room, so you got to pull a little bit of each so that you can hit different people in the room.
Yep.
Mason, did you have any other suggestions?
I think Mike, you might have semi-engaged the audience at the beginning, but it's hard when you're doing this video and it's sort of a fake presentation or fake workshop, because I think you kind of in the beginning were sort of getting to some of that, but you said, okay, so you guys are just going to answer. Okay, and then you moved on. So I think if you really had asked those questions that you asked, but then we didn't answer, I think you would have been, pretty close to, or at least a little bit closer towards that time limit. But I thought very well prepared, you totally have a grip on what you're doing, which when you go to ask those questions, no matter what people answer, you're not going to get thrown off because you know the material so well, you'll be able to come right back to it, rather than sometimes asking a question can throw you off, and you get answers where you're like, wait, what? Like, okay, where was I? And I don't think as a presenter that you will ever really, or a trainer, that you will ever really have a problem with getting back to what topic you.
Like that. Carry on. She's just gonna call again, so.
Say that last sentence that you said again, Mason, because that was good. I think he was a little distracted.
Yeah. So Mike, what I was mentioning is that when you do start to incorporate some questions and you're getting all these different answers, I think you will have no problem with getting right back to where you were and staying on track, because you know the material so well, you'll be able to come right back to it, because it sounds like you think very clearly, and so you won't get distracted or feel like you're off on a tangent. You'll be able to come right back to your topic.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're on the good end of beginner in this. I think a lot of people, when they're first starting to do this and starting to get a grasp on this material, they're way far off. And a lot of my critiques and feedback are, you've got to kind of stick to what we're talking about here, and I didn't really hear a lot of the principles brought in. I need you to give more examples. You're the other end of the spectrum. I mean, you've got it. You've got all the material. We just want you to bring more interaction into the audience. So I think you're on the right track. You're definitely the easier issue to take care of than not knowing the material, not knowing what you're talking about, and having to bring all your stories into focus of, remember we were doing this for Positive Coaching Alliance here? Because I've had some people that have gone so far off, and I'm like, I don't even know what they're talking about. They're telling great stories, but it's not connecting to these principles at all. So I think it's a good problem to have.
Okay.
All right. Thank you two very much. Next week, we are back on track with the regular hangout. We're going to do honoring the game, and that's going to be the last principle that we do. And then
Thanks, Kelly.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. Bye.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
She leaving? Guess we're all set? Oh, can you hear me? Guess not. Oh,
Yeah.
we're all
Sorry.
set?
Yeah, we're all set.
Okay.
We're good. Unless you had any other questions.
No, not questions. Yeah, I would just get the crowd. I know in presentations, a lot of times the problem, people going too long.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't want to have that, you know,
Right.
because then if you drag it out too, it's like, oh man, is this guy going to stop or not?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I do. That's why I wanted to let you know that you do have some time to work in there. I think it's
And I
good that
knew
you
that.
tested it out to see how quickly you'd go, but you do have some cushion time in there.
I knew that. I didn't know I'd forgotten about the 15 instead of 10 though for that part. So
I've seen people do it in 10. I mean, it's a whole entire workshop is like 90 minutes. So however you decide to break it up, that's based on, you know, your style. And I've seen some trainers that spend 25 minutes on Elm Tree of Mastery and 10 minutes on this. I've seen other trainers have done the exact opposite. You know, I like to keep the timing more even for each principle so that we're not, you know, definitely stressing one over another because they are really integrated. But, you know, it's just letting you know you've got some cushion of time in there.
you said 90 minutes?
About 90 minutes. It's sold as a 2-hour workshop, but usually by the time they come in, it takes 15 minutes kind of for the intro, and then you've got like a full 15 minutes for intro, 15 minutes for Elm Tree of Mastery, 15 minutes for Emotional Tank, 15 minutes for honoring the game, and then we have a scenario menu at the end where we can make it more customized and we can talk about scenarios that go on in the workshop. I mean, scenarios that go on for the coaches. That usually takes about 15 minutes, and then there's a closing. So it comes out to about 90 minutes total.
And the scenario, they can like practice basically?
Yeah, the scenario is at the very end of the PowerPoint, and I think I can pull it up for you. Yeah, right here.
Yeah.
If you can see that. Hold on. Let me slowly.
Because I think it'd be good for them after they've heard this and hopefully digested some of it.
Yep.
And to practice.
Well, that's what this is. So these are
practice new ways for some of them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what this is. So that's what I usually say. We finish all the content in an hour, and then you've got another half hour in your workshop to go through each of these things. And these scenarios are based on the principle. So these are all scenarios in the Elm Tree. Losing badly, missing play, mistakes are okay. These are all E-Tank, emotional tank scenarios, and these are all honoring the game scenarios about parent conduct, sideline confrontation, things like that. You can play around with it. You click on one, it gives you the scenario. In a preseason meeting, you explain to your assistant coach, you'll teach the players that mistakes are okay, blah, blah, blah. How do you respond? And then you click to the next one, and it gives you the tools. So this is the scenario menu is where it really gets into the tools of the workshop. It explains, lets the coaches put this stuff into practice, talk about it, get into groups, and discuss how they would handle it. And then it gives you the tools. And then you just click back on this little house down here at the end, and it takes you back to the scenarios.
Okay.
So I usually say at the end of the workshop, have like 2 from each column that you really like, that you know resonate with you and you think are really good discussion points, because there's no way you can get through all of them. Or when you call the partner ahead of time, a lot of times I'll ask, you know, what are some of your biggest concerns? And a lot of times they'll say, you know, we've got really disruptive kids. These kids are just disrespectful. The coaches are not able to do their job. So this scenario, some of your players have short attention spans and frequently disrupt conversation teams and drills. Most players pay attention and do what you ask, but they seem frustrated. As a double goal coach, what do you do? So then you ask them, you know, get with a partner, get with a group of 3 and talk about this. How do you handle this? Or you can just do it out loud. But there's the takeaways. Well, on page 57 and 58, we talk about behavior management on your team. Reward what you want, what you just said. Reward what you want to see. Ignore what you don't. When you can't ignore, intervene. Your best defense is a good offense. Keep them busy. Maybe your practice plan's a little too boring. Maybe you need to pick up the pace of practice or get your assistant coaches to help you out. And then the toolkit, there's a tool for you. Player of the day is on page 37. So it's just another way to do it. And then you can go back to the menu. And then the very end, when you're finished with the scenario menu, it goes to the Herm Edwards. There's a Herm Edwards video at the end. When the book of your life is written, it says you made a difference. And then the next slide is the end of the workshop. And that's it.
Okay.
So they will have a chance. I like to let them practice a little bit in the middle of the workshop and get more out of them, but at the end, they will have a chance to do a lot of interacting.
And then
That
you could
makes sense.
even, yeah, and then you could suggest improvements from that too, right? Or changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, that's why it's set up the way it is. We used to have the scenarios sprinkled throughout the whole workshop, but what we found now is if you get through the principles a little bit quicker, and then you go right to the scenario menu at the end, it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, I think I like that. Yeah, I think I like that better too. Then they can apply what they've. I mean, they just got it, so they might not have learned a lot yet, but they can start practicing their new ideas.
Sure, absolutely. Hi, Jayne. How are you?
Hey, good, thanks.
Good. You jumped on early. Mike's finished.
Yep.
Are you ready to go?
Sure.
Okay, Mike, you're welcome to hang out, or you can go if you need to. You've been on for a little while.
I do have to get going in a couple minutes, so.
Okay.
I will not take it personally.
Okay.
You're walking out of my session. How can you walk out of my session?
How rude is that? I know. I told a guy one time, he said he had to leave 20 minutes early. I said, well, you have to drop and give me 20 push-ups. And I was totally joking. And like 20 minutes before it was over, he's in the back of the room doing push-ups. Funny, I was joking. It was really funny.
I have to watch. I have that kind of sarcastic sense of humor. Sometimes even my athletes don't get it.
I know.
No. Yeah.
We had this conversation yesterday. Feffy went, and she said she's a very sarcastic person. And she was like, she's like, you know, I really don't love the fact that sarcasm is in the tank drainer because I think I use it well. And I said, you know, that's a good point to bring up because if you can use it well and you have that good relationship with your players where they get it, and when you say, gosh, my grandmother could shoot a ball better than that, and your player's laughing, it's different than when you've criticized them the whole time, and then you say, my grandmother can shoot a ball better than that, and it drains them. So I said, I think it's a good point to bring up.
I agree with that. That is a good point because you can use that not insultingly, you know.
Right.
I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
you definitely can. You can use it well. So, Jayne, did you need to see this, or are you okay?
Actually, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, and if you I don't know enough how to do it, but if I'm in a small box and you put your cursor over my picture, it makes this big. So I'll leave this up if you need to see the next slide. Just tell me when to click to the next slide if you want to.
Okay. All right.
I'll start there, and I put 10 minutes on the clock, but I don't want to cut you off. So if you are in the middle of a sentence and the bell goes off, just keep finishing your sentence. I'm just trying to give you an idea of pace.
Right.
And Mike and I are your audience as long as Mike can stay, and then when he goes, I will be your audience of one. So I'll be
Oh my gosh, how are you going to shoot a basket and miss? Okay.
I actually am pretty good at that right now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I take on
Okay,
multiple
that'll work.
personalities, whatever you need me to do. So
There you go.
I understand
All right.
this isn't ideal, and you would do much better with a live audience, but we're going to work with
Yes,
it.
and I would. If I could pace, that would be great too. But I'm not going to
I've had
have you
people
stir
do
my
that.
hips and go back and forth.
I have
So-
had people stand up in the corner of the room, and I just say, you know, you can stand up if you want to stand up, but can you stay within the camera angle?
Yeah, I was
Because
going to say.
people that
please
do
stop
that,
moving.
like, we can't see you.
All right. Well, I'll try to do this and pretend that I'm pacing. So,
There you go.
all right. So, you guys have blown through that first concept. You did a great job. We've got the Elm Tree of Mastery down, and we've talked about the effort, the learning, and the mistakes part of coaching, and how we use that to our advantage. And now we're going to cruise into the next topic. And in order to cruise, I need you to look at the screen and pick a car. And I want you to tell me whether you'd like to go for this cruise on, like, in the car that has the tank on E or the tank on F. And Mike, I'm going to allow that one to you. Which car would you pick?
I gotta go with the full tank.
Gotta go with full tank. How about you, Kelly?
Definitely full.
tank?
Mm-hmm.
And, okay, so why? Why do you want a full tank of gas? What's that going to get you?
Anywhere I want to go.
All right. If you're like me, and you know, if I get close to an empty tank, I am only focusing on the possible sputter and stop to my car, and I'm listening for the sputter, and nothing else is going to enter my brain. Can't focus, barely focus on the road. Definitely not focused on the music coming over my radio, even if it's my favorite song. So if my tank is full, I know I got places to go, and I can get there. And we talk about athletes having a similar tank. Theirs is an emotional tank. And the goal of a coach, and really if we can share it with parents and officials and teammates, is to keep the emotional tank of athletes on full. They're going to go farther. They're going to certainly be more coachable. They would consider themselves, or I would consider a full E-tank athlete as someone who's going to see a glass half full instead of half empty. And they're going to rebound. That mistake ritual that we worked on when we talked about Elm Tree is actually going to mean something. One of the things that we can do with the athletes is try to pick up on where their tank is when they come to practice. So whether that's stepping onto the, into the gym, onto the field, we want to try to gauge, what's coming at us. I've got 25 teenage girls. Where are their tanks? And, well, does anybody else that coaches teenage girls know if it's spring and it's prom, I'm going to have a lot of empty tanks because they haven't been asked yet. And that is actually the worst fate in life for a teenage girl. So we try to get through that as a team, and that's important. But as my athletes arrive, I'm going to want to try to gauge where they are. And Mike, can you tell me how I might look at an athlete and see kind of an empty tank? What's that athlete going to look like? Someone that's coming to you with an empty tank.
Probably withdrawn, maybe even crabby or irritable, but probably not interacting with their teammates very much.
Absolutely. That's the teammate that just looks down. And there are things that happen throughout an athlete's day that we have no control over as coaches. So when they get to us, I don't know, what are some things, Kelly, can you think of some things that might have happened in their day that have put them on empty?
Yeah, they could have done poorly in school. They could have bombed a quiz or a test, or maybe their best friend got angry with them for something.
Absolutely. Their parents might have, as they ran out the door, reminded them of 4 chores they need to do when they get home. That's enough to throw someone into a slightly empty tank. And those athletes are going to be less receptive to everything that goes on in practice. So as a coach, there are some tools that I can use right off the bat. When I sense that that athlete is coming at me down, plotting, not engaging with her friends, as a coach, do you guys have any ideas? What can I do to make that athlete come back to a slightly fuller tank of gas or a slightly more full E-tank? What can I do with that athlete as she comes to practice? There's some real simple things. I'm going to see if you guys have any ideas. And Kelly, what about you? Any ideas?
I think just have fun. Make her laugh. Do something silly that just kind of breaks the tension. I used to have a joke cracker of the day on my team, and that was her only job for a week, was to come to practice every day with a joke. And we'd start off every practice right after the warm-up circle with a joke of the day, and it just got everybody kind of laughing and in a good mood.
Yeah, I love that. Mike, do you have any ideas? What do you do if somebody comes to practice and they're just not ready to be there?
I was going to say even just acknowledge her, just to, rather than just ignore her, at least just greet her and say, hey, how you doing? And she might not even answer truthfully, but just know that you noticed her, just so she knows you noticed her.
Absolutely. A coach that listens to their player, a coach that just asks how the day is. Hey, I noticed you're looking a little down today. Practice is going to be great. One of the things I use as a coach, and again, I coach teenage high school girls, so it seems to matter, but if someone's having a particularly bad day or a particularly slow, bad week, and they come to practice down a couple times, I am really going to focus on that athlete's everything they do positive. And to start, one of the things I do is to let that athlete pick the music. Because music makes everything more fun for teenage girls. I think it actually makes it more fun for youth boys and youth girls and teenage boys as well. And blaring music while doing drills and running sprints somehow makes those things less painful. And that athlete that needs a little boost, if she can pick her favorite song or favorite genre, because sometimes one captain likes country, and we all suffer through that, and then the next day someone else gets to pick the music. And so I try to find that player that just needs a little edge. And if she gets to pick her favorite tunes, with some veto power, I might add, that can change the whole tenor of practice for her. And we talk about things that drain the tank. We talked about the non-athletic side of coming to practice with a drained tank. But let's turn our focus a little bit to what we as coaches deal with and how we keep our athletes' tanks filled. So we talk about tanks going down, and that next slide, which I'm there. Sorry. That next slide talks about things that drain an athlete's tank and things that fill an athlete's tank. So criticism and correction, sarcasm, ignoring, and nonverbal. Nonverbals are huge. And if you look at the filling of an athlete's tank and you look to truthful and specific praise, so it's probably not just great job, Sue, great job, Sue, great job, Sue. It's going to be, I love the way you, for me, changed hands and went left and really did a great dodge in that moment. That's going to be better than just sort of generic praise. Expressing appreciation, listening. We talked about listening to them. Whether that comes before practice, it should also happen during practice. And then nonverbals again. So one thing I want to do with you guys is a little demonstration, and we're going to look at how nonverbals can really impact an athlete's E-tank. So I'm going to get, and Mike, if you got to go at any point, drop that. I don't take it personally. But if while you're here, you're going to be in my net. So I'm going to get you to form a net with your arms like this. And Kelly, I'm going to give you this ball, and I'm going to set this up for you guys. This is the last moments of a game. Clutch player has the ball, has run down the court, has a wide open shot, but you're going to miss. I'm sorry to say you're going to miss. And when you miss, I want you guys to give me nonverbal reactions that drain the tank. I want you to drain that athlete's tank when he misses. All right, ready? Take a shot. It's a miss. Give me those nonverbals. Yeah, a whole lot of cringing and holding hands and looking away from that athlete. And there's almost, with some certainty, you can count on that player looking to you for your reaction. If that shot was that important and they miss, the first thing they usually do is glance over at the bench. So that nonverbal has just told them, wow, you have really messed up. So the next time they get the ball, what do you think they're going to do? What do you think, Kelly?
They're going to pass it off.
Got all the confidence in the world?
They're going to pass it off.
They are going to pass it off because I'm not going to let my team down. Again, I tried it once. I let them down. I let my coach down. They're all cringing. All right, so now I want to try something else. We're going to give you that basketball back. Same scenario. Last seconds of the game. You're going to take this shot. You're going to miss again. But I want you guys to I want you now to fill the tank in a nonverbal way. So go ahead and take the shot. It's a miss. Give me some nonverbal filling of the tank. All right. Yeah, some clapping, some thumbs up, anything that tells that player it's okay. I got your back. I got your back. So the last thing we can do, we're going to add in a verbal. I'm just going to do one more. And I know you're really not this bad a basketball player, but you're going to miss again. And this time, I want to hear you guys use some verbal clues to that player that tells them you got their back. So one more time, shoot and miss. And support them verbally.
Good hustle. Way to take a shot.
Good luck. Yep.
Okay, and there we go. I can be done. I didn't tell the best story.
Go ahead.
Did you guys watch the Georgia-Missouri game?
No.
I'm getting out of character here. Okay, so the one story that I want to tell, I'm going to put this in my things. Georgia was playing Missouri. Field goal kicker had the opportunity to either win the game for Georgia or lose the game for Georgia. Missouri calls a timeout to ice the kicker. This is it. This clock is expiring. And the Georgia coach pulled his kicker, got straight in his face, right up in his helmet, and he said, I love you no matter what. The only words that coach said to the player, I love you no matter what. And then he sent that kicker off to kick the field goal. Now he made it, but had he not made it, I think he really probably is that kid that now is not so defeated by life and having let his team down. But I thought that was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I was on national television 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
I jumped up and said, that's the most positive coaching alliance moment I've ever seen on national television.
And you could see right there what the coach was saying in live time?
Yeah, well, you could read his lips. And then afterwards, they interviewed him, and they sort of confirmed. They said, Coach, what did you say to that player? And he said, I told him I love him no matter what, because I do. You know, I love him as, you know, they're all good kids. And, you know, it's hard to be that guy that has the game on your shoulders, but pretty amazing to have that.
That's awesome.
And they caught that moment on camera, which was really pretty cool.
I heard a quote from Brad Stevens when he was coaching at Butler, young coach at Butler. There was a time when it was like in overtime and there was 2 seconds left on the clock and the other team called the timeout and he got his basketball team over a real stressful moment. I don't know if it was a technical foul or something where the guy basically had to make the shots for them to win the game and they were all stressed out about it. And the players came over and I think it was one of, I don't know what the story was, but most coaches would have been like, all right, here we go. We got to get this, real intense and stressful. And he goes, I'm hungry. Any of you guys hungry? Any of you guys excited for this game to be over so we can go get pizza? And he said to the guy that was taking the shot, whether you make this in or whether you miss this, we're going to go get pizza and we're going to go celebrate this game. And that was what he said. And the guy went out and he shot it. But
I love that. And he missed. I think that was the Duke Butler game in the NCAA, like 3 years ago. Yeah. And it clanged off the rim, but had it gone in, they would have beat Duke.
Yeah. But it was just like, what great thing for a coach to say. Like that was his words of wisdom coaching advice. Like, I'm hungry. I want to go get pizza. Let's go finish this game. I thought that was very cool. All right, Jayne, thanks. Mike, before you go, what did you like most about what Jayne did?
She was good conversational, I think. Yeah, in fact, the 10 minutes went fast. So she was easy to listen to. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank otherwise.
Okay.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'll take that and run.
Yeah, that's good. And you would, and I was telling Mike too, you would have extra time. Usually to do this principle, we usually give about 15 minutes. So the only part you didn't get to was the magic ratio, and you would have had plenty of time to get to that. And I think your Georgia-Missouri story was awesome. I think that's definitely a key. You need to put that in.
You guys got to recruit that coach.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, it's huge.
Mark something, right?
Yeah, I don't even know. Honestly, because I went to Duke, I'm not a huge college football fan until this year. We're 6-1 this year. It's awesome. But I was with my brother-in-law, who's a huge Georgia fan. So we were watching that game, and so I don't know enough about it, but I will do some more research so I have the actual particulars. But it was an amazing PCA moment.
I know. I'm gonna go look it up on YouTube. I bet it's got to be on there somewhere.
It's probably on there. Yeah.
That's awesome. Did you say it was only 2 weeks ago? So it was this season.
Yeah, it was. Awesome. 2 weeks ago.
All right, cool. I'm gonna look that up. I just really liked. I agree. I think your conversation is great. I like the way that you were taught. You said the word "we" as coaches, and I think that's really great just to get us all on the same page. That you're not the expert, and we're all in this together. I thought that was really good. I like how you even said like we're gonna cruise into the next topic. Here's your car. I thought that was kind of clever. And I think too, it's important to talk about. You said it very clearly. The goal of us, our goal as coaches, is to keep emotional tanks full. I mean, that's pretty simple. Pretty simple stated right there. I always say it's one of those things that's simple but not easy. And I think that's a really good example of, and also I like the way you brought in the mistake ritual into filling the emotional tanks, because all of these principles weave throughout each other. And I like, just a mistake ritual alone is a way to fill a tank rather than draining it. So I like the way you brought that up as well. The gauging, it's interesting that the coaches that I have found that coach girls, I think 3 of you that have coached girls in this course alone, the first point you bring up is how do you gauge the level of emotional tank filling? And I think it is a difference between girls and coaching boys, is that the emotional tank, especially for girls, really dictates how they're going to play. Because I found even in coaching boys and talking to coaches that coach boys, a lot of times if the guy's emotional tank is low, they will play harder, because they need to get it out. Like they're going to go like full steam ahead if they're in a bad mood. Whereas sometimes if you've got girls and their tanks are low, man, you're going to get nothing out of them. So I think it is kind of an interesting distinction to bring up. So I think the idea of gauging, how do you gauge their emotional tanks? I love it when you put that out to the audience. What I'd like to hear is what Coach Chapman would do. How do you gauge? So give me your examples. Right. How do you do it in your experience? Do you do it before practice, after practice, in the locker room? How do you do it? And Feffy was one that brought it up yesterday, which I think is funny, is because she was one of your coaches. She actually brought up examples of when she does it. She uses the captains. and she says, hey, what's going on Instagram? Who had a good day like yesterday? Who had a bad day yesterday? Because they know what's going on with each other. So I thought that was a really good point to bring up.
Yeah, that's really funny because I use my captains for that.
There you go.
That's one of the, that's one of the reasons why my captains are so important, because I ask them all the time. They're on Twitter and the group texts and whatever nefarious things are going on social media. So
yeah,
they're a good bellwether of who's having a bad one. They usually can pinpoint it.
They do, and kids are not afraid to share. I mean, they'll tell you exactly how they'll post it to the world, and then the whole world will know how they're feeling before practice. All right, so that's what I would like to hear. How you do it, when you do it. The other thing, I think the idea of music is awesome. Music is a great tank filler, and I think coaches don't use that enough. And not that I'm saying music has to be played during the entire practice, but I think just as you said, having a player pick the music they want to hear, or if you notice the whole team's down, crank up the music. I've seen teams crank up music and change the song for every drill, and it just changes the whole motion of the drill. And if it's like a serious shooting drill, it's not like a it's kind of a calmer song. Music is a great tank filler. But again, if you've got people out there that are not country fans and you're playing country music every time, be aware of what kind of music they like. My daughter said their warm-up music for hockey last year was all this like really, I don't know what it's called, like tech music, like the real high, heavy bass tech music. And she said, Mom, I'd have a headache 10 minutes into warm-up. And I said, well, say something to your coaches. And they did, and a lot of the other girls felt the same way. So they kind of put in a little bit of that music and a little bit of other music. But it was the captains only that were choosing the warm-up songs. And she's like, man, I couldn't even stand the music. It was driving me nuts. So great point to bring up.
I had a captain that I let put the music on. We were warming up for a jamboree game, and she put her music on. I didn't realize it wasn't the usual iPod. And a song came on that had the most foul language.
Oh, no.
And horrible references to African Americans. And, I mean, I could not have dove for that speaker faster.
Oh, my God.
Knock that sucker. Knock the power out. I was like, okay, we'll be doing silent warm-ups.
Yes,
it was bad. Oh, so yeah, you got to be careful. And we have neighbors around our high school that wish the boys' teams would not play. They do it, pump it up for football, and our neighbors are not very happy. But it works for the girls.
You did bring in, too, I wrote down that you said coaches do have veto power over the music, so I think that's a good point.
Absolutely.
A good point to bring in, too. And I really like a lot what you did. The examples that you gave, the way you get the group up, I think that's really good. You kept me engaged the whole time. The one thing that I would caution you to do, though, is remember that the slides the slides are here to support you. You're not here to support the slides. So I would encourage you to not say like, and the next slide says, because I want to hear what you're saying. I want to hear what coach.
And then just have it back me up.
Right. I mean, you can turn and reference them, but a lot of times I hear like, and the next slide, click, this is what it says. And the next slide, click, and the next slide. We try to just let the slides be there for the visual learners that need to see something in order to solidify it in their mind. But I think for your case, you bring up such great examples, and you're saying what's exactly on the slide. I don't know that you necessarily have to say like the next slide, the next slide.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah. But other than that, I thought you did great. Did you have any other suggestions, Mike, for Jayne, something that you would give her a suggestion for?
No, I thought that was good. I like the girl examples because I've coached girls too, so I know what she's talking about. Never had a chance to use music, though. We're always outside.
Well, this is outside,
just get a little bullet speaker and an iPod. It works great.
Yes, yeah.
It's plenty loud enough for my ears.
Yeah. It is, absolutely.
For them.
Yeah, all right. Well, do you guys have any other questions for me?
Not for me.
All right. You both did a great job. I'm glad you got a chance to do this. Are you glad that you got a chance to demonstrate early? You guys don't know the difference, but we used to just wait and do all the practice demonstrations at the end. So we felt like this was important to do it sort of a little bit earlier on just to get this out of the way so you kind of understand the goofiness of the format before we have you do it at the very end.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah,
and Mike, thanks for sticking around.
That sounds better,
yeah, thank you for that. All right, well, I will actually I'll give you guys the recording of this if you ever want to watch it back or watch other people. So it's a long one today because we had so many people going, so you'll have to just fast forward to get to your part if you want to watch it. Or watch everybody else's too.
Okay.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right,
Have a great weekend.
Good afternoon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Right, bye.
Bye.